Hello, and welcome to episode 19 of the PowerScore LSAT podcast. This is Jon Denning in Los Angeles.
And this is Dave Killorn in Napa Valley, as always.
Yeah, it does start to feel a little bit predictable, doesn't it?
When you live in paradise, you will tend to want to stay there.
I have so many comments on that. I'm going to skip them all and jump right to the heart of the matter. I know what you're drinking, but I want you to announce it.
You want me to say it?
Yeah, make it public.
Well, in honor of our theme, which is kind of like a little bit of a Redux preparation for the digital LSAT.
You're going to say quick and dirty.
No,
that fits.
I was not. But since it's kind of like a reduced high points, I was like, I'm going to have a shot. And since I can no longer drink heavy alcohol, hardcore shots like, I don't know, tequila, I'm drinking Fireball.
God, I have so many comments.
And I'm drinking it out of this Ireland shot glass that I got in Ireland, so I feel really good about myself.
I've had shots out of that exact shot glass. I also have never seen you able to drink the heavy alcohol. I've known you for, 17 years?
You've known me for a really long time, but you got to remember...
Never once have I been like, yes, you know what it's time for? Jameson. I've never seen it.
But I will take Irish car bombs like nobody's business.
Yeah, well, like, literally should be nobody's business.
Well, I'm well known for ending parties with that, so I will drink it as long as it's with something sweet. So I can drink Jack Daniels as long as it's with Coke.
Fair.
I mean, I'm complicated in that sense. Also simple. This shot of Fireball, though, is got enough cinnamon in it so I can be, like, pretty happy with it. So I will take it.
Deeply depressed. And I know you actually just took it, so...
It's good, man. Yeah. I drink it every once in a while. It's probably the hardest thing I can drink. It's burning my throat now. I'm an idiot.
Well, you know what? It beats an oatmeal cookie or a buttery nibble.
If I had the makings for those shots, they most assuredly would have been at the top of the list of what I would have taken today, but a little thin on the makings there.
There you go. We could watch your steady de-escalation into diabetes. I'm drinking something slightly more, I don't want to put a gender to it. I'm drinking tequila.
Are you trying to say you're tougher than me?
I don't think I have to say it.
I can own up to who I am. Why
Maybe
can't
that's
you?
The ultimate measure of manliness. Self-admission.
What is it exactly?
This is a Casa Dragonis. I'm sure I'm butchering the name. Hovin. None of those words mean anything to me, but that's what I'm drinking. Nothing crazy, because I think they make a few bottles that are in the 5 figures. I'm not doing that.
I don't know if they... I don't know how expensive they get.
Yeah, maybe it's not them. But this is quite good, and it was $80 or something.
Which is still pretty expensive, in my opinion, for tequila, which should be free.
Should be free. Or
in a margarita. That's the only acceptable way to drink tequila for me these days.
Oh, if tequila was free, you'd be looking for a new podcast partner. That would have ended me at 22. What are you listening to, David?
What are we listening to?
Yeah, I'm just going to press this forward.
No, you should. And although I could talk about alcohol all night.
I know you can. But it's somewhat related, because I know you just were drinking seeing these guys.
Yes, we, for a musical choice, have gone back to the very first band that we selected for episode 1, and that is, again, the Struts. Now, as opposed to us just, recycling everything, the fact is that I just saw them on Saturday night in Napa, of all places, and they just blew the doors off. Yeah. They're so amazing. I just cannot commend them to everyone highly enough. I'm actually going to be in Michigan in about a week and a half, and I'm going to go see 2 shows there, too.
Yeah,
so.
I know you and I kind of labored over the possibility of going to see them Tuesday night in Seattle. I'm sure they ripened some grapes. They are fan-friggin-tastic.
It was great. He actually threw a towel at me, and I caught it.
No.
And I forgot about it.
Look at you.
Because, of course, I was... I hadn't had that much to drink, I'm sure. I don't really remember, though. And 2 days later, Amanda said to me, she's like, yeah, you got that towel. And I was all excited all over again.
That's fantastic.
It's like, yes, I'd forgotten about it.
Your daughter catching a drumstick. And
well, the song, yes.
Yeah.
Which I'm starting to get a lot of swag from them. But the
You're
song
actually
that we
building a mini Struts collection.
I'm gonna probably just create a Struts museum when this is all said and done. They are
Love that.
clearly my new favorite band to see.
Good.
And you and I have seen Muse many times together, who I think is just awesome in certain respects when they play live. The Struts are different; they're much more primal, and I feel it. But the song we've chosen is actually one that I think is perfect for people who are about to take the LSAT. And the song is called "Prima Donna Like Me." It's off their newest album, and it is really all about like how great you are as a person. And in this case, Luke Spiller is talking about, don't you know who I am? And he thinks he's the greatest. And we've said this before, that when you walk into the LSAT, you have to have ultimate and supreme confidence in your own abilities. And so, given that the July LSAT's coming up in a few days, I was like, this works perfectly on all levels for me.
Yeah,
so
it really does. And there are other levels to it as well, which is, I think, bespoken to LSAC's self-assessment of, don't you know who we are? We can make this change, and clearly it's going to be a success, a resounding accomplishment. And one wonders.
You really do. So...
which we will discuss more.
We'll discuss momentarily.
That, like, dun dun dun. We'll leave that kind of hanging there.
So let's get into this week in the LSAT world.
Yeah, let's get to that.
Obviously, the test is coming up, so that's the big deal. But they did release one of their famous short podcasts, which is clocked in at a massive 5:43 in length.
At some point, you and I should talk about whether there's something to learn from these.
Yeah, sometime.
Maybe
no.
No.
I can talk about alcohol for 10 minutes at the beginning of one of these. So
that could be the alcohol talking.
The 5:43, the brevity of that is surprising to me.
There you go.
But they were just talking about the numbers for the July test being huge. They did give one piece of interesting information, and that was about the writing sample that people took in June. And of course, that was the first time that it was separated out from the test.
Yeah.
And there were 10,000 first-time test takers who still had to do the writing sample. And you have to do that within about a year or so they'll release your scores. What percentage of the 10,000 first-time test takers who need to take a writing sample at some point do you think have, at this point, taken it?
Well, I'm not going to make a guess. I know you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
And I think I actually do know the number. But I will say this. Not as many as who have tried. How about that?
Answer. Widespread problems with that system is the rumor?
There have just been devastating technological holdups.
Well, the system doesn't seem to confirm that you finished the writing sample when you finished it. It seems to wait several days in some instances.
That's one issue. Some people couldn't get it to launch. Some people got halfway through it and it collapsed. Yeah, there have been lots and lots of problems. So whatever number they have as completed is low. That's what I'll say.
15%.
15%.
15%. 1,500 of the 10,000.
We're talking a month later at this point.
Yeah, a lot of time here.
Yeesh.
I don't know how many of those people had problems, that aren't being counted there, but 15% seems rather low to me at this point.
Does to me as well.
Everyone does have time. If this was September or October, you'd see that number be higher.
Yeah, and let me just put to this I don't think it'll be a closing statement necessarily, but the conclusive statement that you will not have your results submitted to a law school until this writing sample is complete. So if you were sitting here in October wondering about how Columbia is treating your results, and this was your first test, Columbia doesn't see your results. No one does.
They don't get it.
Yeah. So you've got to do this. If you're having technical issues or just laziness issues at this point, which I suppose probably encompasses both groups, you've got to do this before schools will be able to actually evaluate you.
That's exactly right. But you have time.
You do at this point. Yeah, you've got until at least early mid-September.
And if you're taking this July test, focus on that. Don't worry about the writing sample at this point. Worry about the writing sample later.
This is last-minute stuff. Don't worry about this.
Exactly. All right, with that in mind, let's get to the test that's coming up this week, and let's go through some of the main points that we've noticed that I think students either uncertain about, have forgotten, need reminding of. So this is kind of like the quick and dirty version of what you said.
It's funny, I was going to ask you at the outset of this, why we're doing this.
So we just talked about it 2 months ago in detail.
I think you just hit it. Is we keep getting so many questions.
When we talked about it, we went really, really deep. And I want to go through it in a way that's a little bit, not more surface. It is going to be more surface, but is more like the high points.
Okay.
Don't forget about these things as you walk into this test, because now the anxiety over this event is starting to rise, and I'm certainly seeing it. This is the time to do it
too, right? Like as of this recording,
a couple days
5 days away.
Yep, just a few days to go at this point. So let's talk about the key points.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to start us off?
Well, I mean, you've sold me.
You want me to start?
Yeah, one wonders about everyone else. But Dave,
then you better be entertaining, John. This is your job right now.
This is my job.
You better bring in the bacon now.
Dance monkey. All right. Well, to me, you want to talk entertainment. The most entertaining aspect of this is the fact that it's so unpredictable. That it is truly an unknowable situation as you walk in about to take this test in July. You may get paper, you may get digital. They've said it's going to be 50-50. They've said it's going to be center to center. But you don't know where you are. You don't know what they hand you. Do you get a tablet? Do you get a booklet? That's crazy.
It's another LSAC casino scenario.
Oh, I mean, this is the ultimate casino. Except it's more just black or red.
I know, but I mean, it's a roulette wheel, and right. You know how much I love to talk about gambling.
You don't get to bet a number. This is just betting a color, buddy. And the green's
I love the gambling aspect, though. There's no, it's either win or lose here.
Yeah, this is bananas.
There's no draw.
So you just walk in and you get what you get.
Well, I've had multiple people send me screenshots of their tickets for the test and ask me, what do you think? Mm-hmm. What do you think I'm getting? What does this mean? And it's really hard to tell. There are two scenarios that we have seen where we think there is some information that you can be derived.
It's a bit revealing, yeah.
Yeah. The first is if you get assigned to a computer center on a local campus, that's probably a pretty good sign that you're about to get the tablet.
All right, I've had 3 people ask me that today. Truly.
If you have a computer center listed, I'm thinking tablet for you, my friend. So, but that's pretty obvious in a lot of respects. They say you won't know until you walk in, but I would be surprised if you walked into a paper situation. You're just kind of
predicting tech to tech, right?
Yeah.
Fair.
The other one that to me is, I think, possibly indicative is I've seen a number of people get moved from regular campus test centers to hotels. And I've thought about this a lot, and, it's entirely possible that we're wrong here. But why are you moving people to hotels? Is it because it's a little bit more of a stable environment, that they might have better Wi-Fi there, that you can ship tablets to the front desk and know there's someone there to receive them the day before? And so for me, I've been thinking that these people who are getting switched over to hotels anytime in the last, say, 4 weeks, they're probably tablet test takers.
Oh, man, a lot of people are hearing this just clinched.
No, they shouldn't, because in all honesty, you can prepare for either one, and there are advantages to both.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of like, oh, I lost out here by getting the tablet.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of those.
They're positives.
Yeah, for sure. But I do think you're right.
That's exactly the case. I am right. I hope.
I also think you're humble. Do you want to?
Well, I qualified it at the end. I always hope to be right, and afterwards sort the chips out and see where they fell.
No, I mean, it seems almost unmistakable, like, at this point. Why would they do
I feel it's, like 65-35 with those situations. Yeah. But let's go to the next thing. I think that bears worth reminding.
We're really
which is
bouncing a lot of this kind of like reflectively off of what students continue to ask, despite the fact that we've touched on it.
Yeah, but we touched on it months ago, and we have brought up some of these topics. This is, to me, about making sure that everybody's comfortable.
Yeah, and I mean, and honestly, if there was ever a time, it's these final 4 or 5 days.
This is an entirely unique situation. If this was the 17th digital LSAT in a row, I wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, dude, if you try to rope me into that, I'll
flat
I might
do it
fight you.
Just to irritate you and
I'll
make your
slap
life
the fireball out of your hand.
I might take another shot at Fireball if you continue on.
How are you not already?
Well, because it is Fireball. It's all cinnamony.
Yeah, pour it out. Please.
Anyway, let's go to the next thing here, which everyone has really asked us, and that is the scratch paper situation. Yeah. The scratch paper booklet that you are given is if you are a tablet test taker. So if you get a paper test, you don't need scratch paper. Your book and booklet is the scratch paper. So they're not going to be handing out scratch paper to those people. It's going to be at the tablet locations only. So that booklet, if you do get the tablet test, is probably around 10 to 14 pages in length. It is unlined paper. So
yeah, 10 to 14, like front and back. So
yeah, double-sided, and it's that kind of cheap, thin, tissuey paper that they used to print the test on, or, for some people on Monday, they will be printing the test on. But keep that in mind. You don't need scratch paper if you're getting the regular test booklet because you can write on your test booklet.
Yeah.
Tablet people cannot.
More than that, it's not that you don't need it, you don't get it. So if you're taking a paper test, that is your test.
It's just like it always has been. You're not being disadvantaged by all of a sudden, like, you don't get scratch paper because you have the advantage of being able to make your diagram right on the first page of Logic Games, for example.
That's exactly right. Not to bemoan the scenario of those who get the tablet, but you don't really want scratch paper.
Yeah. The next thing is you can bring in pencils and erasers to the tablet centers. So you're going to get a stylus that has a pen in it, but since they're giving you scratch paper if you have the tablet, you can also use pencil. And that's what we recommend you make all your notes on because you can erase it as needed.
Yeah.
So there's been some degree of confusion, like, well, because they changed the policy within the last 2 months, which is just astonishing to me that they wouldn't have actually thought that out beforehand. But either way, whether you're taking the paper test or whether you're taking the tablet test, you can bring pencils in and an eraser and be okay with it.
I can speak, and I have spoken, I believe, to the fact that when I took the digital test, they told me it was pen. That was it.
Yeah.
There were no pencils, there was no erasing, this was it. They told me a few additional things about scratch paper, which we're about to touch on, but that was it. Like, you were basically beholden to what they gave you at the outset.
Several months ago, they were talking, the stylus has a pen built in, and that's what you
But yeah, I'm talking several Mays ago.
Yeah. So much has changed.
Has changed just in the last several weeks, so...
The one thing that you have to keep in mind, though, is when you get down into this, all this kind of like platform stuff aside, and that's the fireball.
There it is.
Affecting my voice.
Was that a second shot, or was that just residual?
No, I haven't taken the second shot.
You're getting old,
the fireball's going to come get me. The test is identical. I've seen some weird theories thrown around that's like, I heard that it's no longer an order of difficulty. It never was in an exact order of difficulty, so I'm not sure about that. It's going to be the same exact content. So if you have logic games on the paper test, you're going to have the same 4 logic games on the tablet in the same order. Same thing with reading comprehension, same thing for each of the logical reasoning sections. Where it appears might change. You might have games 1 and the person next to you has LR1, and then in the tablet center, RC is first. But it doesn't matter. The content inside those sections is identical.
The 101 questions that count towards your score will be the same across the board, period.
Now, people have asked me, is it going to be a harder test? Is it going to be an easier test?
We've touched on this, but let's just repeat ourselves.
I'm not going to repeat myself deeply, John. I will only hit the surface point,
see what that fireball
as I am wont to do.
All right, go ahead.
We talked about this in our Crystal Ball seminar last week. So if you want like the deep dive into that, go listen to that. It is online for free. But the idea is this is going to be a middle-of-the-road LSAT. It is not going to be easier. It is not going to be harder. We don't expect it to have something crazy or unusual. People have said, well, it'll probably be a little bit harder, and because it's a new format. And then I've seen arguments, no, it'll be easier because the tablet's harder. Right. No, it's not. No. It's not going to be any of those things. They need a perfect transition from paper over to digital. The things that you are changing are the test format. When that happens, you do not change the difficulty of the test. You do not mess with how the scale works.
Yeah, you don't want to operate off of something that's that unpredictable or that's that uncommon.
It's like a study.
Right.
If you have controlled variables that you're working with, you don't start switching all the other variables. You leave those static.
That's right.
The logic behind this is impenetrable. So
Yeah.
it's going to
How
be
does
the
the
same
average
type
person
of
shoot free throws? You know what? Let's get some NBA guys in here. That's not the way you would do it.
I don't know if I followed that at all.
All right. Fair enough. We.
Wait, are you the one drinking Fireball?
I wish.
No, you're drinking tequila. You must have had more than one shot then.
Well, give me just 1 second.
Now I will have more.
Shot break. So
I could get behind that as a general point.
I can see
for
your
future
eyes light up
podcasts
from a distance. What I would say about some of this is, if you're going to do the same thing, we've talked about tests that they could potentially reuse. This is a question, Dave, that I got asked today. I think you probably saw it as well, because people rarely limit their questions to just one of us.
True.
What are the odds that you see like this in piecemeal form? Or that someone might look and be like, oh, that's part of the February 2016 test, but not the whole thing. Or that's an experimental from XYZ. Do you think they're going to break it up?
Let me go back and actually preface your comment.
Sure.
In the Crystal Ball seminar, we talked about tests like February 2016 and February 2017 were pretty good candidates.
Yeah. I was trying not to give too much of that away, but that's fair.
Well, I mean, it helps to have context,
you
right?
You kind of have to at this point.
Yes, and you didn't provide it, so here I am.
All right.
Save
Dude,
the day.
I said go ahead, Fireball.
Anyway, we've suggested that those are some really attractive candidate tests for them to use. Now, those tests were never released. So those of you who have asked me where you can get a hold of those tests, you cannot. If they'd been released, they wouldn't use those exams. The fact that they were unreleased February tests is what allows them to possibly give it again. Now, the question that John's referring to is that we've been asked whether or not it could be that they would use portions of that test and not all of it, or mix it up, mix and match it. And John, what's the answer to that?
No, is the answer to that.
Correct.
No. If a section was ever used previously as a scored part of an official test, whether released or not, February or June, they're never going to use that again as experimental. They won't do it.
No, they'll never use it again as a scored portion of the test.
They're not going to take a scored portion previously and turn it back into experimental.
Yes,
is what I said.
Will.
Huh?
Right. They did it in Florida for those hurricane makeup tests.
That was okay. All right. I should really clarify this then.
Oh my God! Everybody, right there. Another moment.
Oh, Jesus.
Mark it down in the history books.
Is this the second time in your life that you want to?
No, it's about the 13,000th time that's happened, but this one's documented.
You son of a bitch. What happened in the February 13 reuse in October of 2017 is that a section that had actually made its way onto a scored portion of a test, September 2016, specifically the virus game, was reused as the original experimental.
That's because it was old tests.
Yeah, that's what
had happened. About. They needed makeup tests for a hurricane situation where the students took the test like 2 weeks later. They pulled out these old exams.
I wasn't so much wrong as I should probably just clarify.
You were wrong. Oh, I love it. This day's gotten better.
It feels great over here. The sun just set in Southern California.
So sorry for early twilight.
It's all right. What I mean to say is that a section that is scored on your test will be from a previous section. I don't even know how to phrase this anymore, Dave. You do it. I don't even know what I said originally that was so wrong, but I feel like it was.
Now, if they've released any portion of a test, they will never reuse that in a scored section.
Correct.
So we look at old tests because they repeat the form and style of what they do, not because they typically repeat the exact same game.
Yeah, and when you say we look at old tests,
knockoffs.
we look at old release tests as not so much potential like reusages, because again, they're not going to use like June 2016. You will never see that as an actual LSAT again. We look at release tests for patterns, and we look at unreleased tests for potential reusages.
Exactly. Yeah. A fine line distinction that I think from an industry standpoint is not well understood.
Definitely.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else is actually tracking this kind of stuff the way we are.
I do.
I do know.
You do. They aren't.
I was like, please inform me because
There
I
you go.
believe the answer is nobody.
Yeah, we're miles ahead.
I know that our catalog of information on the tests over the years
It's
is
it's unimpeachably fair. Like, we're so far out front.
there's no question
Yeah.
about that. We're way ahead on that. But
which is again why we can talk about like last July and be the only ones, literally the only ones on the scene to be like, hey, maybe you should study circular games.
yeah. But that also was a matter of analysis. And again, we've talked about this in our crystal ball, so we're not going to go there right now. Let's continue on with the high points for Monday. So we talked about how the test isn't the same for both formats. However, there are some differences. When you get in that room with that paper and pencil format, the proctor is going to start that, use a clock. Typically, they'll have their own digital clock or they'll use something on the wall. But each room will be timed according to what the proctor says, and there's possibility of mistakes, just like there always are when humans are involved. The tablet proctor is really, they're still at the same front of the room, but they start everyone at the same time digitally, and they control it from a digital standpoint. That takes away a lot of the human error because when the section hits 35 minutes, the tablet tells the proctor that, as opposed to the proctor having to look at the clock and remember, hey, sections are only 35 minutes. When you have 5 minutes left in a section, your tablet will actually give you a notification that says 5 minutes remaining. Whereas your paper and pencil proctor has to say that verbally, and we know throughout history that some of them have lost focus. Would be the most diplomatic way for me to phrase that.
Very charitable. Yeah, there's a proctor hub at the front of the room when you have a tablet, where everything is basically synced back into that. So it knows when your sections start and everyone's are the same. It knows when your sections end and when the 5 minutes is and how long the break is and all the rest.
Exactly. So just keep that in mind. And when you get to the end of the test, they'll collect the tablets, they'll collect the paper and pencil exams. There's not a writing sample at the end of these tests anymore. So you don't have to sit around and read about the decision that someone's making that you don't care about. You can do that later on your own time.
You're being remarkably charitable. Are you running for Democratic candidate for president?
No, there's too many already. They need to narrow the field there. Although I read something today that said the top 5 candidates are now starting to consolidate their infrastructure and their money to the extent that they're just starting to blow away everybody else that's in that field.
It makes sense that it's kind of like wealth distribution, that the top whatever percent owns 98% of everything.
Yeah, it's the 5 who you would expect, I think, probably.
Yeah.
Not to get into politics too deeply.
I don't get really to put on my hat and root for somebody right now?
You can if
Notice
you
that
want.
I've been very restrained.
We never talk politics.
We don't.
And I'm not sure it's a great idea for us to anyway.
Let's start with religion.
No.
No?
No, let's move on.
Let's start with the score preview.
Yeah. So you get out of the test and you're like happy, and clearly your first stop is the bar to see friends that you haven't seen in a couple weeks while you've been studying.
That's right.
And
reserve
to reacquaint
just
yourself.
Enough energy to get to a bar stool.
You need to. Or have your friends transport you there in like one of those Egyptian litters where they put it on their shoulders and run you down the street.
Fantastic.
So right to the bar with him. You then will have a long wait to get your score. You have to wait until August 28th, a good 6 weeks here.
Doubly long.
Yeah, and this is an extra long period of time. And I know some of you are like, what? Why are we getting, penalized for that? You aren't, actually, because there is a huge rainbow or a pot of gold at the end of this entire journey. And that is that when August 28th hits and they start sending scores out at 9 a.m., you have the ability to see your score without it being final. And then you can make the determination to keep it, or you'll have, I think, probably 5-6 days to decide whether or not you want to cancel it.
Yeah, let's talk about 2 things as we transition into that cancellation thing.
Yes.
If you'll indulge me. And I know you will. Because I own one half of this microphone.
Yes, I'll put some fireball while you do that.
That's right. You go ahead. Choke. One is, part of this is set up just on the burden of questions that we continue to be asked. So we're not doing this to repeat ourselves. We're doing this because people just seem continually confused by it.
I've gotten this question I don't know, 14, 15 times
Easily.
in the last 7 days.
Easily.
That's just me.
Yeah, and I can replicate that myself. Oh, you are. I can hear you. You are doing Fireball. Well done,
man.
my friend. Well
I
done.
mean, I very rarely have the ability to just pour a shot and take it myself, so I'm gonna.
Normally it's me pouring them down your throat.
I'm gonna pay for this later. I can already tell.
Will. Yeah, I can hear you. Number 2, let's talk about why this score delay is extreme as it is. Because I know one of the questions that I keep getting asked is, why don't we get automatic scores? Why don't we get immediate results or feedback as part of this digital, and to quote, penalty? Why can't we at least have some reward for having to take this digitally? They know right away how many I got right and wrong.
Yeah.
Why don't I?
In the future, I think they will probably give you a raw
I think
score.
so too. A raw score, like an unofficial, you got 83 out of 101 or whatever.
Yeah, you'll probably still have to guess about the
Why
scale.
do you think this
and
one's
so
as
forth.
long as it is?
Well, I think we know why it is as long
Well, I know
as
you
it
know
is.
why. I'm just setting you up. Look, play t-ball with me as you take your
Well,
shots.
Isn't
Jesus
that what
Christ.
your question was?
This is like a talk show where you've submitted like questions to ask and you still act surprised to be asked them. Come on.
I don't have a response to that.
Okay.
Overly aggressive nature of what you just asked me. But
right.
I will say
hey,
this.
Dave. Why do you think it
can,
takes so long?
That's, I think, a pretty clear answer. They've actually said this, and it's because they need to make sure that the data between the paper tests and the digital tests, that it is valid. Yeah. They need to compare groups. They need to make sure that everything has worked the way they expect it to work. And they are, as we know, exceptionally good handling the data.
They are.
This is a very, very well-made test. It is widely respected in the testing field as being a really top-level test in terms of how it is constructed and the mechanics of it.
Let me ask you another question that I've been continually asked. If they do happen to reuse a test, let's say, as some suspicions suggest, that this turns out to be February 17 all over again, that Groundhog Day moment, will they change the curve?
I don't think so. I would be very surprised if they did that.
Let's say the digital results come out and they're like, oh man, people scored 2 points lower on average across them.
I don't think they're going to, and I think they've done their homework to the extent that it's going to be about the same. I understand that we get into these hypotheticals, what if, but you can't know. There's no way to be like, they adjusted the digital, and guess what? They're never going to tell us even if they did.
Yeah, that's a very good point now, isn't it? We'll never know because we don't have the original to compare.
Yeah. If there is some moment of learning at the end of all this for them, it will be kept hidden from all of us for years and years. So we're not going to know. The part of the argument that we made about the possible tests that they would reuse was built upon the idea that since they have this comparison point, they're going to want to link it back to an original sizable group of test takers who already had performed on this exam.
Yeah, you need a baseline, a point of comparison.
That's exactly right. So I think they walk in having a really good idea of what's going to happen. And of course, for a lot of students, there's this idea that the digital test will be worse for them. I don't know that that is the case. I know that I like some things about it better and I dislike other things, but they do kind of counter each other. I don't like reading comprehension on the digital test. It is cumbersome to me. I like to be able to write on the passage.
Like separate games diagrams, ditto, right?
Yeah, but although that's a little bit less of a problem for me.
So when it comes to you, like if you actually had to hierarchical rank your things that your problems, reading comp is going to be the top of your list?
Reading comp is the most annoying to me. Games is in the middle. LR, I think, is very, very similar.
Yeah, LR is an improvement, in my opinion.
Because you have instantaneous score transferring in all sections. Mm-hmm. So you do have these offsets.
Kill and answer, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Jump question to question based on flags. Like, yeah, LR to me, which is half the test, and that's a big thing.
It is a big thing.
It was like, I like this.
It's faster. But here's the thing. Someone says, well, reading comp's harder and it takes me more time to get through it. Well, you do save some time because you're no longer bubbling in these little ovals. So there are offsets here in terms of what's occurring. And I don't think you can say it's an overall huge loss. Yeah, reading to me is the biggest area of concern. Reading on a tablet and the fact that you can't see the whole passage, these things I do not love. I find them to be the most problematic. But LR doesn't feel all that different to me. It's just one question, and then you move on. It's nice and clean, quite honestly. And games is, all right, my diagram's a little bit off to the right or below the screen, but it's not hugely. I'm not dying over this.
Right. So in your experience,
your
nothing was inherently just detrimental. It was adjustment level.
You definitely have to adjust.
Like, I got to practice this. I've got to get comfortable.
And I felt like the approaches to RC were the biggest adjustment.
There you go.
But getting back to your point, I don't think that they're going to be adjusting the curves to somehow especially handicap or benefit one group versus the other. They're not going to say, the digital people did a little bit worse overall, so we're going to loosen up their scale. I don't think that's going to occur. I think they're going in and their expectation
is this. What if that does occur, though? What if the digital results do actually come back worse?
Well, I don't think they're going to tell us.
Put you right on the spot.
So you want to know what I think they would do?
Yeah.
I think they would probably
only because I know you've been asked, and I've been asked 50 times in the last 48 hours.
I'll tell you what I think they'll do.
You're getting more than one an hour.
All right. So it comes out, and it turns out that in their internal data banks, digital test takers have done 2 points worse than what they expected and what they should have done compared to paper.
Here it is, folks.
I think they're still going to release all the scores as is. And then for the next test, they'll make an adjustment.
So you think July people are just on the hook for that guinea pig penalty?
A little bit. That's why you get to see your score.
I mean, I'm not going to fight you on it. I'll fight you on so much.
Yes, often, daily, quite honestly.
Not with a belly full of Fireball in you. I will not fight you.
Dude, I've had 2 shots of Fireball. It's hardly anything.
Fireball through your veins. I will not fight you.
Fireball is weak in general.
I agree with you. It's a terrible, terrible choice you've made.
I said weak alcohol. I don't think it's a weak drink.
This. And the curve. I actually agree with you on that. Even if it turns out that the results are different, they're not going to do anything for July.
They're too far into this, and they'll have this gigantic pool of February test takers from the past, in all likelihood, already sitting there to curve this out and actually make it work.
I completely agree with you.
I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Listening to this, write the date down. I completely agree with you.
Great.
I know. I have nothing else to say on it.
Neither do I. I'm speechless.
I don't know what to do.
So
you did talk a little bit about like the cancel idea as to maybe how LSAC has a backdoor out.
This covers you.
Yeah.
If you've taken the digital test and you're like, I hated that, well, you don't have to keep your score.
Right.
You're out, and you can retake the tests down the line.
Let's talk about that process, because this is another question I've been just bombarded with.
I do want to make one last comment about the score preview.
Okay.
And this has come up a lot. It is for both tablet and paper and pencil test takers.
Yes, very good point.
So you get that score preview no matter whether you get the digital test or the old paper version. That's really the biggest point out of here. We all get score preview from taking this exam, which is
literally half
sweet.
The people who are about to do this, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 14,000, 15,000 people, are going to walk in and take a test as always.
Yep.
Paper-based, and they have zero different outcomes. You can cancel it, you'll see your thing, it'll still take 6 stupid weeks.
Yes, it will. And LSAC in their podcast, the Keeping Up to Data podcast I mentioned earlier, it was funny to me that one of the sentences like, well, I think we know why the enrollment is up for this July test, because it's the first digital test. And I was like,
nope.
And also because you get score preview and a free retake. I was like, those are the real reasons. Yeah. That's why everybody's taking this.
It's the longest you and I have gone in conversation where you haven't used the word colon.
No, but that's because we weren't talking about the blog.
I know.
We were talking about the podcast.
I feel somewhat like uneasy in my seat, and I know what. That's why.
Yes. Well, they haven't released a blog in a month, so I haven't had the opportunity to say the famous name of their blog.
Save it. Hold it.
Soon it will come.
Clinch.
Anyway, on to that cancellation process and the whole score preview thing. Right. So everybody gets to see the score preview on August 28th, and you'll have the opportunity to lock it in or to reject that score. If you decide to cancel and not accept your score, what do you get for that? What's your prize for playing?
Well, I mean, you get to retake the test, but not as soon as you might like.
Accordingly,
Is that fair? Like, that's a fair
yeah,
way.
according to the current thinking,
Right.
you're not allowed
I
to
know
use
you
it
and
for
I are both
September.
optimists when it comes to this, which is
Very much so.
usually a misplaced bet.
Yeah, depending upon who we're
It's
dealing
usually
with.
money poorly spent.
So let's put it right to the finer point.
Do it.
Can you use currently under their policy that free retake coupon, as they call it, to this? Can you apply it to the September LSAT?
No.
Are we hoping that they will amend that policy and allow
Yes.
test takers? Yeah. We are
That's a no
really
and a
hoping
yes
they
if
will.
you keep it square at home.
That was an instant yes. You did not even wait for me to
No,
finish the question. And you were
of
like,
course, because we're both on the same boat with this. It's like, why would you not let them take the next test for free? You tell them you can
especially
take
when
a free test.
And it's at the beginning of the
I
application
know, you're
window.
right there, you're studied, you're prepped, presumably.
And
You've
you've
got
just
your
come off the
July results, they're not
summertime.
quite what you want, you're ready to go, and pay for another one.
If you're in
Left.
college, you're not too deep into midterms or anything like that. There's
That's
so
a good
many
point
arguments.
too, isn't it?
Yeah. Whereas you get pushed back into October and the conflicts, especially for college students, start to rise. Let's hope that they change that and they say, hey, if you did register for September, we'll let you retroactively apply the coupon and refund your money.
Right.
I'd be cool with that. There is some precedent for them doing things like that. And we know that they listen. They do listen to what is out
pencils,
there
right?
in the chatter. Yeah, the pencil thing's a great example. We kind of begged them at the end of that May 1st podcast to be like, let pencils be used. And I think it was within 7 to 10 days that they'd reverse the policy.
Look, I'm actually kind of willing, I think you probably are too, I'm kind of willing to take some credit for that. I think
I've often felt that you're always willing to take credit. Yes, you're always willing to take credit, so I have no problem with you.
Yes, exactly. So that's nothing new.
I think you're right, though.
But part of our noise, I think, bled through the cacophony of whatever they're listening to and was like, look, let people bring some pencils, dude. Like, marrying them to this pen situation on your stylus is stupid. And sure enough, they turned a corner. Well, in this case, they actually 180'd.
Yeah, they just opened up. You sure it wasn't a 360 they did? Listeners wouldn't know that is an old joke.
It was a 540. Which is actually, if any possible degree was appropriate for LSAC, 540 is probably it. Where they spin around at first, and then they realized they were going in the wrong direction to begin with.
Oh, God.
Yes, but they kind of listen.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. Just like they listened about like the score release time, standardizing it. Yeah, so I think there's a really good chance that this will come to fruition. All right, one last point about cancellations. I've been asked by a lot of different people if law schools will look down on cancellations that come from the July test because they will assume that you had the digital test and you couldn't handle it. And the good news is they simply do not care.
Yeah, they really don't.
Yeah, they're not going to look at you and be like, you couldn't hack the digital platform, could you? You're a loser, and we're not going to let you in. That's not how they think. They just care about whether or not you got a certain score and that meets their medians and things of that nature. They will not go a step further and say, okay, how did things go on the digital test? And how does that compare to paper testers? They won't have that information, for one. And secondly, even if they did, they don't know what happened. It's the same thing behind any cancellation. Did you get sick? Did you get a bloody nose? Did they have construction going on outside? We don't know what the reason was. And same thing here. Maybe you canceled because your tablet malfunctioned. I know somebody who had 2 malfunctions during one of the field tests and had to get their tablet replaced twice.
Yeah. Which I don't want to put that into the universe as a likely consideration. I think you're going to be just fine with your hardware.
Most likely, it's not going to be an issue. This is probably like a 99.8%. Everything will be just fine.
I think that's probably about right, actually. Law schools live and die on credentials. And if you don't give them any, which is a cancellation, they can't see anything. What do they do with it? They just look right past it.
Well, they don't want to make an unwarranted assumption about what caused you to cancel. And we've said that a million times about every cancel, and it's 100% true for this cancellation as well. So schools won't care about it. It's not a big deal. Don't use that in the back of your mind as a reason for, I need to keep my score regardless. It should not be a factor.
Or at this point where you still could theoretically pull out of July, don't use the likelihood of a cancellation as a reason not to take next Monday.
Exactly.
Take the test.
This is the best opportunity LSAT takers are ever going to get in their lives.
Yeah, dude, I've never seen a better LSAT.
No, it's 100% fantastic.
Which explains why the numbers ballooned the way that they have, unexpectedly, which wasn't unexpected to me.
No, we knew it was going to happen. I think they were surprised by the strength of the enrollments for this test. It is
easily the biggest early summer, if you could call it that, test that they've ever had, I think.
Yeah.
Not the biggest test ever, of course, but this is a monster of a July.
Yeah,
as it should be. It's the best test in history, in my opinion.
It's the best deal ever. You don't often get great deals from LSAC. It's not like they run discounts on enrollment or, 50% off signing up for the LSAT. This is the best you're ever going to get. Take it, run with it, do as well as you possibly can. And, on that note, the last thing that I really want to talk about. Just thinking how many names
we call them and how charitable never is one of them.
Well, this is as close to charity as I've ever seen from them. Let's end on a note of positivity about this, because I'm actually really positive about the entire event. I think there's such a beautiful silver lining with this score preview that it's just undeniably great. But I know there's still a lot of people who are worried about the format they get. Remember, if you walk into that test center and you see that it's paper, it's just another LSAT. All is as it usually is, just proceed as normal. If you walk in and you see that they're giving out tablets, don't freak out. Remember, this is not a big deal. There are some definite pluses to having the tablet.
Yeah.
There's that navigation bar at the bottom. There is the fact that your answers are instantaneously transferred, which is going to save a lot of time.
Truly.
And there's no more, hand scoring to worry about. You can't make an error as you bubble in your Scantron sheet. So there's some really good things about this as well. It's a different format, a different environment. Of course, change sometimes can be difficult in something like this, but take the positives from what they are and use those. Because the really most important thing here is that there's a safety net behind this. You get to see your score and you can decide whether or not you want to cancel it. And there's another point that, John, I think you'd made earlier today, which is that the July LSAT is a great test because it's the last one before the new repeater policy.
This is the last that doesn't actually haunt you.
Doesn't count,
really.
It
doesn't chase you around for the next 3, 5, however.
5 years
forever,
or lifetime.
Which
your number of lifetime takes.
That's right. You and I have talked about this in a separate podcast, but
yeah, this one does not count. So there's a lot of positives going on here. Walk in, do your best, focus, believe that you can actually make this happen. As the Struts would say, act like a prima donna on LSAT day, and walk in and say, "Don't you know who I think I am?" and then just go out and crush it.
I love it. Well, there's nothing I can add to that, so I love
That's
that.
a perfect close.
It is.
All right, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you get a chance, please subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube, or any other place you can find this podcast in our wide world. Give us a rating as well. And if you have any questions, please send them to lsat@powerscore.com or lsatpodcast@powerscore.com. Thanks so much. Have a great week. Go crush the test.